Thank you, Councilmember Zack Zappone, for joining the Center Square today for this interview. As our readers know, the primary election just wrapped up, and you secured over 50% of the vote to advance to the November general election with your challenger, Christopher Savage, who we spoke to yesterday. But hoping to hear a little bit more about your policies, your goals, what you've accomplished thus far, and then what you would do if elected to a second term serving on the Spokane City Council. But before we start, can you just give our readers a little bit more background on who you are, your background in politics, as well as your profession?
Yeah, thanks for having me, and hi everyone. I'm Zack Zappone. I'm current council member, and I was born and raised here in Spokane. I'm a sixth generation Eastern Washingtonian, and I'm also a public school teacher. I teach at the same school that my grandpa graduated from and that I graduated from. And I ran for office from the very beginning for one simple belief that if you work hard, you should be able to get ahead, and that everyone in Spokane, everyone in our country deserves a fair shot. That's what I believe as a teacher. And when I left Spokane, I went to college on the East Coast and saw extreme inequalities in our society. I was the only one from Spokane from a public school, and my roommate was one of 22 boys from an all-boys private school. And I would come back and work at McDonald's on breaks, and a lot of my peers would get elite internships on Wall Street or on Capitol Hill. And so I tried to figure out what are these ways to help everyone have the same opportunities that I had. And I decided education was that pathway. So that's why I became a teacher. I taught at a low-income school in the Tri-Cities for 3 years after graduating college. And there I saw that no matter how hard my students were working, that we were working, they still struggled to get ahead. They lacked access to healthcare. I
Mhm.
had one student die by suicide, but didn't have access to healthcare. They lacked access to safe streets. I had two students in 2 years get hit by cars crossing the street to the school, and no one was doing anything about it. And they lacked job opportunities, and many of them just didn't have uh, a lot of ways that they could see themselves working hard and getting ahead. And so I left the classroom. I taught abroad for a year in Columbia, and then I got my master's degree in public policy, where I focused on local policies and what we can do from the government perspective on trying to level the playing field and make it more fair for people. So if they work hard, they can get ahead.
Mhm.
I graduated that program, moved back home to Spokane, and COVID happened, and there were no jobs. And so I was looking for a job and decided to volunteer and helped out on Spokane Food Fighters at that time. And there we partnered with it was a like grassroots sort of COVID new nonprofit-y type organization that was taking donations from community members and paying those to restaurants to keep them afloat through the pandemic. So buying their meals and then delivering them to people who weren't leaving their houses at that time. And so my dad and I helped deliver over 100,000 meals, keep businesses afloat during the pandemic. And then I ran for public office. Since being in public office in city council, I've been dedicated to helping people have that fair shot from affordability, particularly housing affordability, to addressing our safer streets and safer neighborhoods. I've believe I've delivered on many of those results, but people are still struggling to get ahead, and so that's why I'm running for reelection. Is I want to keep working on that, and I think I have the unique skills and values to bring to our community to help everyone have that fair shot.
Mhm. And as you've touched on, you've spent your first term backing land use reforms, funding for social services, and walkability initiatives greatly in District 3. What do you see as the most impactful accomplishments from your time on council, and how do you plan to build on these if reelected in November?
Yeah, I've been very supportive of those land use reforms that have really broken down barriers to building more housing. And we've seen the results of that. In the last year, we saw that rents decreased in Spokane by 12%. We saw year over year record residential permitting, which helps create more development and more housing
Hmm.
supply, which lowers the costs. Some of those have been um, allowing missing middle housing throughout the entire city. We've also gotten rid of parking reforms or parking mandates that were costly government mandates to require parking, off-street parking at sites. And so now we've pulled back those government regulations and said the free market can decide. Here's a plot of land. Let the developers, let the banks decide what do you think is the best use and the best maximum profit to build on that lot, whether it's a single family home or a sixplex or 40 units of apartments. The market
Hmm.
gets to decide what that is. And we know that Spokane has a housing crisis, just like a lot of other places across the country. And we finally seen that start to stabilize in Spokane. Housing prices are not skyrocketing 30% every year anymore. Rather, it's more a healthy level. We have a vacancy rate for rentals that is more healthy level. So I think that's been some of the most impactful issues, and that helps address homelessness and keeping people in their house in the first place. If we have more housing, more affordable housing for people to live, they're less likely to become homeless in the first place.
Hmm.
I've also been a champion of some public safety measures. We went to voters last year and got approved a 0.1% sales tax increase that brought back traffic patrols and neighborhood resource officers. And so, since I've been on council, I've allocated millions of more dollars towards policing. And that's been both for the additional sales tax increase, but also just raises 7% year over year for our police officers, which we've seen more police officers join the Spokane Police Force. We were historically really short on policing, over 50 officers short. And recently we were seeing closer to full staffing of our police force. So if we just increase the number of officers, right now we actually have allocated more funding than we have officers still. So just allocating more funding for officers isn't going to bring them there, but we got to recruit and attain them, and that starts with good living wages for our officers. And then on Safe Streets, been really championing different types of projects in our neighborhoods, particularly around adaptive design or quick builds. How do we address an urgent safety concern? How do we get speed bumps into our neighborhoods? How do we build that protection so people, all road users, whether you're in a car, on a bike, or walking, you feel safe walking to your neighborhood? And there's been some places in our district where we've seen traffic fatalities. And so I'm really proud that we've been able to allocate funding for improved crosswalks, those hawk lights or the ones that are overhead that you push the button and people are able to cross. Those are now connecting people across busy arterials where people are averaging 40 miles an hour and had no way to cross the street to get to their grocery store. They'd have to drive to the grocery store, even if they lived across the street for it. And so I've been proud to support those and championing that and trying to move the city in the direction of safer streets for all road users.
Mhm. Those adaptive design strategies and the traffic calming measures, something particularly popular that I've seen, at least on social media among residents, in the media included. I mean, walking around Spokane, going from Riverfront Park and then out into the neighborhoods, being able to use more of these areas where you're divided between the street and the traffic itself, definitely a benefit to the community. You touched there on homelessness. The city spends millions every year on its homelessness response. And some residents are critical, saying the issue persists. What would you say to taxpayers who question whether the money is being spent effectively, and how do you hold service providers accountable for measurable results?
Yeah, I think we all recognize that homelessness is a complicated issue, and that is really obvious from the last year that I spent working on updating our ordinances. And we went and did roundtable discussions. We had 50 to 100 plus stakeholders across our community, bipartisan, across the board, from providers to business owners that attended these roundtable discussions. And we said, what can we do and what can we update at the city level for particularly in this case, it was largely around our camping ordinances and enforcement ordinances. And through that process, we were able to come up with a new all above approach to addressing homelessness. And we passed that ordinance in June. That's called Home Starts Here, HOME, for healthcare, outreach, navigation, multidisciplinary engagement, I say enforcement, and economic security. And so, as you're talking about on the navigation and outreach side, how do we address with providers on those metrics? In Home Starts Here, we did pass some metrics that we should be measuring on addressing homelessness. I had talked about and trying to add metrics such as very specifically our point in time count and how many people
Hmm.
are street homeless. That unfortunately did not pass. But I've been an advocate for trying to have more specific and direct metrics to measure those outcomes. Um, we have different holistic or different ways to address it, from keeping people housed to getting their healthcare needs met so that they don't are stabilized, and then
Hmm.
getting them off the street into a place that where they're stable. We've seen different types of shelters across the country using data and research that we know, like tiny homes, have very high success rates with people moving out of the tiny homes into permanent housing within 3 to 6 months. So I've been very supportive of those types of efforts, and I've been supportive of efforts that include metrics um, to to talk to providers and hold them accountable. We also have passed a good neighbor agreement. I, in my first year in office, attached or worked with providers to pass a version that was harder to enforce, and we saw that through the roundtable discussions that our previous version of the Good Neighbor Agreement wasn't being enforced very well. So we did a second version. We heard what are the most important things that we require from our service providers on being good neighbors. That's cleaning up your area, responding to issues of clients, so they're not having these negative impacts on our neighborhoods. And then we put that in the contract, and the contract can be taken away if they're not abiding by those types of requirements.
Hmm. That was a proposal that came before the roundtables and then was revised throughout the process. Definitely particularly popular within the community. Looking outside of particularly, say, street level homelessness, where a lot of individuals are struggling to find a job due to discrimination and other issues there. Looking more at, say, low to middle income families that are, say, renters. Chris Savage told me that, Spokane, the city of Spokane, should annex these 10 areas around the county to boost supply and drive down prices. You've supported density and zoning reforms within the city limits instead. Can you elaborate on why your approach could deliver better results and why you think his plan might not work as planned?
Yeah, I don't really understand what annexing would do. There's a lot of land in the city and around the city that's already developable land, and that's very costly to annex. And the city
Hmm.
it doesn't have money right now to annex any land, and so um, I I don't think that's really the right strategy right now. And um, unfortunately, my opponent has also been advocating for additional sprawl. And we've seen that in some of our neighborhoods right now, such as 5 Mile and Indian Trail, where we have been building, or Lake Valley as another example in our city,
Hmm.
where we have been building on the outskirts these larger houses, single family houses that take up lots of space. And our roads don't have the capacity to handle that. And so we're seeing increased congestion. We're seeing long wait times. I
Hmm.
get complaints from residents that their water pressure is going down as no more houses are being built. We don't have the infrastructure to support the water pressure so that they have poor water pressure at their house. And that's nothing more frustrating than someone who's been living at their house for 20, 30 years, and all of a sudden now they don't have the water pressure that they used to have. And so
Hmm.
this type of sprawl doesn't help address the problems of our community. We have a lot of vacant properties in Spokane, whether that's in our downtown core, up along our arterials like Division. In the Northwest, there's massive vacant lots, and so we need to make sure that we're filling those in and taking away the barriers to doing that. That doesn't mean that there's not going to be any more additional housing outside
Hmm.
of the city core. I think there needs to be different options for lots of different types of people to have and to live in our city. And so we need to have apartments for people. We need to have more condos, and there's a lot of reform that's needed on the state level for condos to be applicable. That's really the new starter home era, because traditional starter homes are just becoming unaffordable for families who are starting out. And then we need single family homes for people. So it's not about dictating. I don't believe the government should dictate exactly what type of housing should be built where. But again, I believe the market should decide where housing should be built and giving those options. But we do have to be real with the externalities or the negative impacts that come from sprawl. And largely, People don't want to end up like Seattle, where they're sitting in their car
Hmm.
for 45 minutes to an hour to commute to work in their jobs. So we need to make sure that we're investing in that infrastructure, that we're able to have different types of housing throughout our city.
Mhm. And you spoke on that infrastructure there. I think another good point to bring up is egress and ingress points, particularly with the Latah Valley, like you mentioned. I know when you guys passed the moratorium, I believe it was last year, there was a lot of conversation around some of these neighborhoods only having one ingress and egress point, and in a particularly vulnerable area for wildfires that could be devastating, as we saw with the Gray and Oregon Road fires. Um, you spoke a little bit about vacant housing and not vacant housing, vacant lots, and taking advantage of those to help boost density within the city's core. Recent ordinances that have added responsibilities for property owners, including requirements to manage issues like encampments, loitering, and in some cases, hiring private security if code enforcement finds that necessary. How do you respond to businesses and property owners who feel like some of these council policies are offloading public health crisis onto them?
Yeah, I first want to go back because you did mention the importance of wildfire, and thank you for bringing that
Hmm.
up because it is incredibly important. I know firsthand how important that is. My family lost their house in the Gray Fire in Medical Lake, and my uncle lost his house too. And so I know the fear during the fire of lives and worrying about like getting my grandma out of her house and the
Hmm.
safety around that, and then the devastation and the how that impacts in rebuilding your lives. And so. Again, I think Spokane is a little different than other parts of the country that we do have to interact on these edges. My parents lived in Medical Lake proper, and it was never an area that you would expect there to be a wildfire that comes through. It's not like it was super rural and out in the county. We've seen that in
Hmm.
LA, the fires coming into the city. And so we have to be very intentional about the interface between the wildlands and the city. And if we're building out and expanding that way, we're setting up a lot of people for potential devastation in the future. So,
Hmm.
very important point to make there too. On the commercial property owners ordinances that we recently updated and passed, I think what's most important for people to know is that this is really about addressing negligent properties and
Hmm.
property owners. I hear from businesses themselves that there's nothing more frustrating to them than seeing a business next door to them that is being neglected and
Hmm.
derelict and bringing blight to their neighborhood. And that hurts their own business and it attracts criminal activity to those properties. And so this ordinance was really largely bringing into an alignment and requiring even the city to abate properties a proper way to make sure that those nuisance properties across the city are being addressed and handled so that they're not bringing blight to our neighborhoods, not bringing blight to our commercial districts, and having that negative impact on everybody. And so it does require some basic upkeep on things, such as making sure that you don't have overgrown vegetation, that you don't have
Hmm.
weeds that are growing up to your knees, that have infestation of rodents and other things. Making sure that buildings don't have graffiti on them, making sure that you don't just have boarded up windows or smashed windows, because we know broken windows invite more broken windows. And just because you put up cardboard or plywood doesn't mean that it's making it look good in the neighborhood. And again, the city has been guilty of those things too. And so this would require the city, as they abate, that they have to comply and use similar colored paint to
Hmm.
abate and use uh, not just boarded up plywood, but either paint it to make it blend in with the building or use like plexiglass or something. So it is really about addressing that. I did meet with commercial property owners beforehand and talk to them about the concerns and what they brought up. We discussed again with code enforcement about their specific concerns, and their specific concerns um, were not going to be penalized because they're not
Hmm.
one of the property owners that neglect their properties in the city. And so if you're a property owner who cares about taking care of your property, which most are, thankfully we have lots of really great property owners who do care about that and understand that their businesses having graffiti isn't good for their business. And so it would not impact them very much. There were concerns about, like if we're out of town for a week, what would happen?
Hmm.
And again, code enforcement doesn't go out and cite people right away. It's a complaint-driven process. They get a complaint, they pass it along, and if you remedy it in a reasonable amount of time after your vacation, you're going to be fine. Code enforcement has never, historically in the city of Spokane, ever been about penalizing people right away. And so that
Hmm.
I understand the fear and the concern about that. But if it starts becoming that way, please have people reach out to me and we'll know if they're getting these penalties immediately. But that has not been the historical practice, but we can change the code if that becomes part of it.
Hmm.
And again, with the you mentioned too potential private security or fences around properties. That's it's for properties that are open to potential criminal activity, and so it's just asking if your property or your building can be accessed. That you need to figure out a way to make sure that it's not accessed from other people who are coming and potentially having criminal activity on your
Hmm.
properties. And because right now, everybody has to pay for that criminal activity with police response, code enforcement cleaning it up, and other things. And that's really not fair on all the taxpayers who are taking care of their properties and ensuring that there's not criminal activity on there. That we should be paying through tax dollars for the city to be doing that.
Hmm. And just to provide some clarity there, I mean, you're speaking to vacant lots and say vacant properties that there's some buffer between the public right of way. You're not talking about, say, buildings that border the sidewalk and individuals being on the sidewalk. That wouldn't be the property owner's responsibility.
Correct. It's only on private property. So the other ordinances that we passed dealt with public property, such as the sidewalk, and that's the obstruction and unlawful camping ordinances that
Hmm.
I don't know if that's on your list, but I'm sure that's been a hot topic that we can also dive into.
Hmm. And then one of the other concerns that I've heard just with the commercial property ordinance is that it doesn't apply to city properties. Can you just what's your response to that? I guess particularly you spoke to the obstruction ordinance. I guess that would your argument be that that ordinance applies to the city properties?
So different parts there that it would apply to city properties that are buildings, the water building that gets graffitied. We would have
Hmm.
to get rid of our own graffiti on our buildings. So that's kind of this nuisance property type ordinances. For everywhere else in the city, such as sidewalks or um, parks or streets or alleyways, that is really more governed by the obstruction and unlawful camping ordinances. And so that we did pass saying that anywhere in the city at any time, regardless of shelter bed availabilities, no one can block the right of way. No one can sit, lie, stand, block with their items, block the right of way. And so that
Hmm.
is an ordinance. It just went into effect this week. Um, the hard part is going to be the implementation of that ordinance. So I think passing that, we all believe that no one should be blocking the way, that we should have free and safe access to every part of our city. The reality is we don't have places and facilities for people to go if they're violating that.
Hmm.
Uh, Jail is full and has been full. It's on red light status. And those citations will have people turned away from jail. You can have people drive up there, you can arrest them, take them
Hmm.
to jail, and then jail will say, "Thank you so much. You're not actually as dangerous as someone else that we need to have in here. So go back on the street." And so that
Hmm.
is still enforcing it. A lot of people believe that's not enforcing it, but that is enforcing it. And we have a facility problem. Now, I don't believe that jail is the right solution for everyone who's on the street. I do believe that it is an option of last resort. That is an important part of the complicated process of addressing homelessness.
Hmm.
But I do believe in what the ordinance says we should give people multiple options first to comply with the law and get them the resources they need to get off the street. And so if they accept going to a shelter bed, if they go to a detox bed, then they're more likely to not go to jail and more likely to not end up back on the street. We see recidivism rates extremely high. The from people who are homeless and going to jail are much, much, much more likely to end up back on the streets than
Hmm.
people who go to a different type of shelter, like tiny homes I was talking about. However, I don't believe that's the case for everyone. And we've heard stories many times from people that jail was the right thing for them and it helped them get clean and sober. And so I do believe that needs to be one of the options for people if they're
Hmm.
refusing and refusing treatment, they're refusing to go to shelter, they're doing criminal activity and causing harm to our community, then that is one of the options on the table for them.
Mhm. And homelessness definitely isn't unique to Spokane. I mean, the I-5 corridor, Seattle, and all those cities over there, it's definitely a problem that they struggle with to a much greater degree than Spokane. And like you're saying, while jail is an aspect of the solution, I mean, no one has the solution. We don't know how to address the root cause yet. And Spokane is joining Seattle and so many others in trying to get there. But from a taxpayer perspective, I mean, enforcement, like you were saying, I mean, these aren't jailable offenses unless they have other outstanding warrants in most cases. And it costs a lot of money to arrest the same person over and over again. That's a costly cycle for taxpayers. But this camping ordinance that was recently passed, it was quite a controversial turn of events from the public's perspective on how that came to be. I want to hear you speak to that a little bit and how the process worked. I know there was quite the kerfluffle over the motion to reconsider after several hours into the meeting. That's not an abnormal motion under Robert's rules by any means. Definitely something that you guys have used in the past. But coming out of that, the Ethics Commission has approved an independent investigation into that, essentially around the allegations of quid pro quo with Councilmember Navarrete. Can you speak a little bit to what happened that night and what do you say to voters who feel like the motion to reconsider after many had left undermines public trust?
Yeah, I would say that you saw in practice what it looks like to listen to people when they testify and when council members change their mind in practice. And that's what people want. They want to see that their testimony, their words are making an impact. And that looks uncertain and chaotic because people are changing their minds. And that is what happened is Councilmember Navarrete and Council President Wilkerson changed their minds during the meeting. And we heard from feedback collectively that there were things that we could do to change the ordinance. And specifically, that was on the 7 day requirement to do it. And so they're like, people don't like the 7 days. How can we change this and make it better? And that's what we said is they had an idea. They're like, I would
Hmm.
rather change it to 3 days. And so we're like, let's bring it back and change it to 3 days. And then we heard more testimony from folks where they said, don't do this right now. There's still more changes you can make. And then we
Hmm.
deferred it again after that. And so I would say that this was an example of your city council members listening to feedback and making adjustments in the moment. It's not easy necessarily procedurally to be able to do those things, especially when there are late night meetings
Hmm.
and how procedures go on things and how humans are able to share that. Sometimes they think about that in the moment where they're like, hey, I would like to make this change right now and offer it in
Hmm.
the moment. Or sometimes people take a few more minutes to think about something and we're on to the next agenda item, which had another 30 minutes of testimony. And then
Hmm.
they're like, hey, I would have changed it this way. And you're like, oh, then let's reconsider it and make that adjustment. So I understand the frustrations of what that night was. It was frustrating for everyone.
Yeah.
But it was truly an example of council members and democracy in action of making adjustments based on the feedback that we were hearing in the moment from people.
Mhm. And for context for the listeners, I mean, this meeting it started at around 6 p.m., adjourned just after 1 a.m. Very long. Others, we've seen long meetings go till past 10 and stuff. This one was particularly long. In hindsight, do you feel like the agenda was kind of bloated, pushing through a lot of these homelessness ordinances on one agenda. I know that you guys deferred the camping ordinance and I believe the aggressive solicitation ordinance to June 30th. But in hindsight, do you think it'd be better to not put so much on the agenda to allow for more time or to adjourn later? Because from my understanding, it was that a lot of people were upset because they had left after the initial vote that turned down the camping ban and then were just surprised afterwards. But I mean, regardless, the meeting was still ongoing.
Yeah, I mean, we've heard issues from people historically about having meetings that start in the middle of the afternoon. So then it would have ended in a reasonable time. But then people don't have access to meetings if they start in the middle of the afternoon. And we see that at the
Hmm.
county level, our county commissioners meet at 2 p.m. And so they don't have access. A lot of people are at work and people can't come and talk or share perspective. And so it is always difficult, especially when there are high interest items where
Hmm.
people want to come and testify, and a lot of people want to come and testify, and each person gets 3 minutes. I think there's different ways to manage that, right? If every person had less time to testify, it would have been over at a much earlier hour where people had that. But we've also heard people say, "Don't cut my time off. I want my time." And
Hmm.
so I think that's a hard balancing act, and we see that. And I've actually been an advocate because there's a lot of people that don't want to come to city council meetings or leave early and don't pay attention because they go so late.
Hmm.
And that is difficult if, we have some people that testify two, three, four, 5 times in a council meeting.
Hmm.
And if you have a group of people that do that, it really delays the agenda for everyone on these specific issues they come to look at. And they have families to take care of and they have kids to put to bed. And so I think I,
It's a
and
hard
not, I
game to
don't,
play.
I don't think anyone ever wants to do a council meeting until 1 in the morning.
Hmm.
But I think it's that balancing act of how do you make sure to give the public enough access to be able to attend a meeting and see it and give their input and have us hear it. And so it's a thing that we're always constantly debating and trying to do better on.
Mhm. I would like to touch a little bit on the county meetings and the city meetings. Like you said, I mean, it's a give and take both ways. I mean, the county, you do your meetings in the morning, a briefing or a strategic meeting at 9, and then a briefing after that, and then a legislative meeting at 2 p.m. People are at work. A lot of the times that you see people testifying, it's individuals that are retired and able to attend, whereas the city, I mean, you guys started around 6 p.m., easier to testify in the beginning, but I mean, when you have these big agendas, it's difficult going late into the evening. So it's a balancing act, and one that you guys had to strike at the end of 2024. But next question, your challenger, Chris Savage, he's positioned himself essentially as the citizen council member, but he doesn't have children, a spouse, and he's not a homeowner. Uh, as a family man yourself, why do you believe your life experiences with your family and being a teacher and in the community, how do you feel like those better equip you to represent Spokane's working families, renters, and small business owners?
Yeah, I think I have just more experiences that are relatable to more people. And it's funny because I'm also a part-time employee somewhere else, and so clearly also a citizen of the city too, and a citizen legislator. But yeah, I've been a tenant, I've been a homeowner, and a landlord. I've had people stay in my house that I've had to charge rent, and so I
Hmm.
have multiple experiences around that, and raising a 7 and a 9-year-old in our community and interact with the challenges of taking kids to neighborhoods and festivals and dealing with school and balancing the struggles of those competing needs all the time. And so
Hmm.
I just believe that it takes a lot of different experiences to understand and relate to people. And I don't have the experiences that everyone in our community has had either. I
Hmm.
don't think any one council member has the full perspective of everyone in our community. I think that's why we have a council, so we can have lots of different diverse perspectives represented. And I think I bring in more experiences that more people in our community have had. And we'll always meet and talk to people about. And so I'm not a commercial property owner. And so I go and meet and talk to them to learn more about it. Uh, you know, I'm not Jewish or Muslim. And when we had the resolutions earlier about the Israel-Palestine conflict,
Mhm.
I went and talked and learned about it. And so um, I've always been committed to learning and talking and hearing perspectives and meeting people and going and touring their facilities wherever they're at, or just meeting them wherever they're at, and to try to learn and have that empathetic viewpoint. And I think that's really something that I've learned as a teacher. I see dozens and hundreds of different people come through my classroom, through our school, and their different experiences in our community. And it takes wanting to care about people and wanting them to have the fair shot. And I think that's ultimately what I'm running on, is seeing so many different working and middle class families struggling to get ahead, myself included, having had
Mhm.
experiences growing up where we struggled to get by. My parents showed me that hard work and get ahead, but there were months and times where we struggled to make ends meet. And so wanting to make sure that, everyone has that opportunity. If you work hard, you should get ahead. And that is basic fundamentally why I'm here and what I care about.
Mhm. And looking at the time we have left here, we have about 2.5 minutes left of the recording before Zoom cuts me off here. So, quickly, this might seem a little bit redundant with your last statement, but to close here, what's your core message to District 3 voters heading into November, especially those still deciding between your current record on the council and then your opponent's promises of change?
Yeah, I think that anyone should be cautious about um, lofty promises and goals without specific policies and actions and plans. And anyone that tells you, I can just solve a problem is not really being aware of the different complexities in a problem, such as passing ordinances to ban camping across the city at all times, neglects and knows about the problems of our jail facilities. And so I believe I have demonstrated that I have a hard work ethic and will show up to the community and work hard to figure that out and bring solutions. And we have seen those. I've demonstrated that year over year on addressing affordability. We have made it cheaper. Rents have gone down. Permits have gone up. On safety, we have hired more police officers. We brought back neighborhood police officers and traffic patrol. We have mental health co-response deployed teams. We're addressing the opioid crisis. On safer streets, we're building more construction projects and having those safer crossings across our streets. But there's still more work to do. I believe I have the experiences to know how to hit the ground running and keep growing and
Mhm.
moving on those things where my opponent will be learning about it. Anyone can attend a council meeting. You can watch it online. I don't think that makes you qualified to be a council member, but rather actually working on meeting folks and having those understandings of complex relationships and where those opportunities to make those changes and advocate for those changes to help working folks is important. And again, I'm fundamentally running because I'm a school teacher from here and care about our community for everyone to have that opportunity. If you work hard, you can get ahead and have that fair shot. And so that's why
Well,
I'm asking for votes.
thank you, Councilmember Zappone, for joining us today. I think it's about to cut us off, so I'll close here. For readers to know more about Councilmember Zappone's policy, you can visit his campaign website on Google